Hey guys, so welcome to NBP Actions 16 Texture Control Pro. Now, first and foremost, we want to show you guys how it sets itself up and how you can utilize it. And then I'm also going to explain some of the helper actions that come with it, which is very common in our Pro series, as well as explain the benefits of it and some practical world uses that you can actually leverage it for. Because at first it may not be obvious, especially on our more, complex actions. So this one might seem familiar at first, but I really want to explain to you what it can do and how it benefits you. So initially I'm starting off here with an image of Alex that's actually done. This has been color graded. This has been skin corrected to my liking. I did not try to go super polished beauty, but even on this situation, when you're done with skin work, potentially even done with color work, you don't have to be. You might want to go in and go, I would love to control some areas of texture a little bit more, whether you just simply choose to, or the client wants you to, or there's just another reason to control texture. And I will add while we're here, texture is not just skin. Okay. We have denim and we have hair even, and we have some other shots we're going to walk through that are going to show you a little bit about just controlling texture. So we want to get your head out of the idea that this is just frequency separation and just for skin. This is for texture control of all kinds. There's probably better workflows for full skin retouch using all kinds of tools. That's not what this is necessarily supposed to be, though it could be leveraged in that manner. This is about controlling texture in a flexible way so you can make the decisions while you're working and get exactly what you need done. Now, let me explain. Let's say, for example, that on this area of her cheek, on her right cheek to camera left, let's say, well, we like all this, we'd like it a little bit smoother. We like some of the broader texture to be smoothed out, but the higher texture, the more finite texture, to be preserved. You might think frequency separation. Absolutely. But then my question would be, well, on your blurring operator for frequency separation, your low layer, what radius would you use? What blurring operator filter would you use? And what kind of extraction would you do? And then lots of questions that you have to answer up front and kind of guess. Well, Texture Control Pro doesn't let you guess. It makes gives you choices so you can have flexibility. So let's go ahead and run it. We're going to run the very top one, NBP Texture Control Pro. It does quite a bit. Now, while I'm recording here on a couple-year-old MacBook Pro on, I think this is a 21 megapixel image at 16-bit, it takes 10, 15, 20 seconds to run. It just does. It might take you 5 seconds. It might take you a whole minute. I don't know. But it's going to do quite a lot to give you choices. When you're done, you delete the layer stack, but it gives you choices. So let's talk about these choices, and then we'll talk on the variations. We mentioned a minute ago, well, what radius do we use to extract? Well, the good news is we have multiple extractions of texture here, ranging from extra high, meaning that this is a very high texture, the very highest frequency of texture. In this case, this is a radius of 1 by default, okay? Then the radius gets larger and larger and larger on all of these different textures. So you can paint in on the mask because the masks are black right now. You can paint in on the mask to bring in texture. Now, this is a great way to also sharpen. We're here to smooth, but at the same time, it can sharpen. This is the lowest one. The lowest one based on this action anyway. All right, so if I painted white with it, we're going to sharpen quite a bit because we're using that extracted skin texture that we've extracted with a pretty broad median radius. So it's very, very strong. May not be that useful, but if we go to texture high, which is a lot tighter of a texture, now we can sharpen with a very tight texture if we really want to do that. Now, the very top one, generally speaking, is the tightest high frequencies. Very good for really finite, detailed sharpening, which I'm going to guess you probably can't even see on this video. Okay. But let's start with that smoothing idea. Let's come down here to the blur operators. This is a copy of the image set up as a smart filter, giving us the opportunity to use our 3 classic blurring operators for texture separation, right? For frequency separation. We have Gaussian, surface, and median. And these are all, you can toggle them on and off, and you can put them on together. So right now it's Gaussian, okay? It's a smart filter. If you were to double click it, you'd see that it's set to 10, okay? And that's fine. We'll work with that for now. Let's go to our mask and let's blur the area, smooth the area that we want to work with. Now, here's the greatest part. This is all flexible. I don't have to commit to a radius right now. Right now, it's on 10, and I don't even have to commit to a blurring operator. I can pick another one. I can mix and match them, okay? I can make my mask however I want, and I can tweak this a million times over. So let's say I go back to the Gaussian, double click. I make it 15, a little softer. Well, okay, now I've done that. Well, now I have to bring texture back, right? Well, which texture do I want to bring back? Okay, so let's say I'm going to show you the slow way, the manual way, and I'm going to show you a real fast way. Let's go to the texture low, the broadest texture that this stack has right now. If I bring all of that back, see that? We might go, okay, let's turn that on and off and see. Off, on, off, on. I'm not sure that it made a huge difference. It changed some transitions here, and that's great. It worked okay, but I think I want a little more smoothing, so I'll go ahead and just fill that one with black. And then I'm going to go to medium low. Let's paint that in. Okay, just like that. Pretty broad area, though. This action is great for fixing tight, specific spots, and you can always paint with black and, tweak it. Oops. So let's see what we've done. Off, on. We look at our shadows up here. It's a little bit blended. We can either mask that right now, or we can go to the very top folder of the layer stack, and we can mask that out if we feel we don't want that in our shadows, and just to clean up various perimeters. Went from that to that. Let's zoom in. From that to that. Smoother, definitely smoother. Let's say we're still not happy. So we're going to go to medium, and we're going to paint once again. Even a tighter texture. We're obliterating the low texture, and we're bringing back a tighter texture. Now let's see what we've done. And off, on. It is exceedingly subtle. Off, on. Now, that's the sort of slow way to do it. Let me show you the fast way, okay? So we're here, and we know that we painted this blurred area down here on our blur operators mask. We hold down Alt or Option, and we can drag that mask into any other one. So let's drag it into medium high. Boom. And now we have that. Off, on. Off, on. You see how our broader texture went away and our finer texture stayed put? But here's the thing. You might think to yourself, okay, I'll zoom out and it looks a little fake. It looks a little blurred. A couple things we can do. Obviously, opacity is the number one line of defense that we can do, but we can also go to contrast. This is our little contrast booster, because a lot of times what happens when we do this blurring, this automatic either skin or texture modification, we tend to lose contrast, and that gives us a little bit of a fake look. Sometimes that helps. That's cool. But here's another thing we can do. We can go to like texture medium, maybe put it on a 20% opacity, and paint in some broader texture that's still cleaner than the original. From that to that, from that to that. And then if we really want, we can change opacity. So this can be like 75. Actually, we want that sharper, but we're going to make our broader one a little less, maybe like a 70%. And then our blur, we can make that like a 70%. Off, on. We have a little bit of a sharpening effect going on, so we can turn that down a bit. Off, on. See that? Let's look at that again. Off, on. So it's a very good way to go in and tweak a specific area of texture, but you have flexibility. I can come back in here and go to Gaussian and make it 25. See what that looks like. Make it 15 again. Make it 10. See what it looks like. Make it 35 and go crazy and see what it looks like, right? If I really, really wanted to. And if I didn't want Gaussian, I was concerned about the perimeters or something, I could turn on median actively and see what kind of result I'm getting from median, and then choose 20 on that one. Why not? Okay, so now we're getting median. Not a bad result. And you can mix and match. You can turn on Gaussian on top of it if you really want. A lot of times it doesn't make that much of a difference, especially if your blurring is really excessive like this. It just becomes one giant blurred mess. But you can still stack these different operators if you want. And there's even surface blur, which depending on the looks you're trying to do, can do different things, right? So surface blur, these perimeters here stay a little too harsh. Don't like that. So I'm going to go back to median. That helps smooth that out a little bit. Now, another thing you can do actively at any point with our helper actions on top, we have linear light textures, hard light textures, vivid light textures. This is going to change all your textures to those blend modes actively. So you can see back and forth, which might be better for you. So let's go to vivid light. Okay, vivid light's a little less intense. Hard light should be even less intense, yeah. So we just might like the way that hard light works better, even with our set opacities. We might want to increase it. Oh, hard light's a little bit softer. I don't mind that so much. I'm going to increase everything, including my blurring operators, because I kind of like that. But I can always toggle linear, hard light, vivid light. Vivid light brings up some nice specular stuff here in the middle that hard light does not. And that linear exaggerates a little too much. Vivid's kind of in between. So you can play with these until you find, one of them that works. Mind you, experiment with any blend mode that you think could be cool, but they work a little bit these are the 3 most common one that works the best. So that's why they're here, right? And, you know, if you're messing with all these masks and you're thinking to yourself, I sort of like what I've done. I'm going to put them all back to 0 though. I'm not sure about my masks. Reset texture mask. You push that and everything goes back to black. And then you can come back here to your blur operator, make it 100% or whatever it is you need to do and start painting again or start, you know, bringing masks over. So again, hold down Alt or Option, drag this mask over here and you got that texture in there. And you can change that to linear, off, on. So it's about flexibility. I'm not saying this is your new way to edit skin. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this is a way to control texture, whether you want to sharpen or whether you want to smooth out certain types of texture like broader frequencies and preserve higher frequencies. You have flexibility and that is the key. That's the entire point. So let's reset our texture masks. I'm going to manually reset my blur mask and I'm going to change it to Gaussian. Okay, let's do an example down here on the jeans. Now we've done this one before, but we're going to do this to show you what we can do. Now, let's we can clean up our blur if we need to, but let's go ahead and blur this little area right here. Okay, so we have this. We're going to blur it kind of crazy and then we'll mask it out a little bit cleaner. Because you might think, well, okay, I'm not sure what you're doing here, but it's still kind of cool. Again, we showed this before in some preview videos about Action 16, but I think it's cool to show again, to show you some possibilities. And we're going to do some other variations of this on our training video here for Action 16. All right, so the Gaussian, we have 15. Let's do 20. Cool. Now, a couple options here. We can hold down Alt or Option and drag this mask into another one. Let's drag it into high. Boom. Okay, let's look at the difference. Off, on. See that? So you zoom out, it feels like the denim is a little bit, you know, smoother, a little more polished type of, you know, less crinkly, thicker, thinner denim, I should say. Okay, and then we have the con, which is set up to the skin right now, but we can go ahead and change that there. Boom, add a little bit of contrast. And if we don't want that, we can drag that into the very high and see what very high looks like. That might be a little bit soft looking, a little bit fake looking. So let's turn on the regular, reset that one. I don't mind that one so much. We can try hard light. We can try vivid light. The other different field, hard light, a little too hazy. Don't like it. Vivid, a little less intense, but very good. And then linear, the most intense. So once you start exploring texture that's not skin, these changes can make bigger differences and it could be a big deal for you. Okay. So we could take this exact sort of setup as it were. And if we really wanted to, let's say we go, oh, well, I want to start getting this perimeter here. But if I start blurring all of this, a couple options. You can switch to median, but of course you're still going to have Gaussian, or you can hit right here, subject mask stack folder. So we're going to hit that. It's going to go ahead and put a subject mask on the entire stack, allowing me to blur to the edges without going over. We're still going to have some haloing, but generally speaking, we can get over it. We can get around that or deal with it when it comes to textures like denim and whatnot. Okay. So now we have that masked out, which is kind of cool. Okay. Something like this. Let's just say that, and then we'll come to our texture that we do like, and we'll bring that in. Okay, just like that. And let's see what we've done. Off, on, off, on. And like at any moment, we can always clean up our edges if we need to, and play with contrast. Now, this contrast can be adjusted. You can make your own layers to add more contrast. You can do whatever you want to do. Now, at any moment as well, if for some reason you wanted to, you have this paint layer. Keep in mind, we can make a bajillion paint layers. We don't need just one. So we have one for now, painting, meaning that we could come in. Let's say we want to figure out this cuff right here for some reason, and we really want to be specific on how we paint in the color. So I'm going to use my eyedropper tool at about a 5x5 average because we have a lot of tight texture here. I don't want to pick a bright white and then a black suddenly. So I'm going to paint in with like a 4 or 5% flow, similar to what I do on frequency separation work. I'm going to target this, this cuff, and then I'm going to mask it as needed. So let's come in here, paint some dark areas there, soften that, soften this. It's getting a little bit. There you go. It's just this you might think to yourself, what am I doing? This is a mess. Just hang in there. Hang in there. We're going to show what we're doing. We're softening all this up. Can even come in with a very small bit of white. Add some dynamics. There we go. Excellent. Something like this maybe. Make a mask on that. And then we quickly mask out the cuff area that I have in question or I have in mind. something like this. Maybe not the dark area right there. And right to that perimeter. Excellent. And then I can come, clean that up, and choose another texture, maybe this one, and quickly paint, quickly paint in texture back, just like that. And now I've smoothed out that a lot. Granted, I may need to clean up a lot, you know, depending on the blur, depending on a lot. And on the very top too, I can just come in here and paint with black if I really want to get those shadows under control, because they're getting a little hazy looking, something like that. So off, on, zoom out. We can add contrast if we feel we need to, just kind of bring it back to life a bit. Okay, off, on, off, on. You see that? See what we did to the texture there? And we can experiment again. You know, we might go, hey, let's try vivid light. Vivid light might look a little bit better. And then we can change the entire opacity to like 90 if we want, something like that. Maybe 80. And we just smooth out the texture on the denim, which looks, I don't know, just a little bit smoother if for some reason we wanted to. Pretty common request, especially from art directors and whatnot. So that's how we use this texture control to control any texture, whether it's sharpening, like I said, or controlling a smoothing of an area to get a certain type of texture gone and to preserve another type. But we have flexibility. How much we want to preserve, how much we want to get rid of, right? Obviously, too far extreme and everything's going to be a mess, but within reason, it can really, really control just about anything. These are pretty common setups that I might do when I'm controlling different textures, skin, concrete, outfits, denim, lingerie, texture on a wall, all kinds of things, carpeting. But this has it all in one big stack to give you tons of flexibility. When you're done, you feel happy with it, you stamp to a new layer and you delete your stack. And then you keep rolling and you've done the work that you need to do. And again, you know, the texture control is pretty powerful. So all these little detailed texture, which don't look bad on denim, but if for some reason we wanted them smoother, we just can do that, right? Let's talk about another variation, okay? We also have a NBP texture control manual. When we run that, now we get to pick the kind of texture extraction that we want. This is going to be, as you look over here, the layer stack that's in process, low for extra high. In other words, this is how we create a low layer to extract texture from it for the very, very highest, extra high. I recommend leaving that one or two so you can have the super finest texture available to you if you want. Now you have 6 more to make. So you get to choose those numbers. Let's say 5. And then the next one, which is going to be high, 10. I'm going to go in 5s. Okay. Let's say I decide I need a lot of flexibility on this. So I'm going to choose the broadest amounts that I can, because I want a lot of text. You know, I want to have my very high just in case, but now instead of maximum of 18, I have a max of 30. Okay. It's going to go through its process to finish everything else. And there we go. So now the one that used to be 18, the one that used to be 18, if we zoom in, if we paint with white, this one's now 30, which is extreme, as you can see, right? But we don't look at it as like, that's useful for us. No, we look at what's possible with it, right? And the high that used to be 1 now is 2. So it's ever so slightly more available to us for very fine sharpening of eyelashes or eyebrows, because that's that very, very low frequency and little highlights here on the skin. Look at the fine sort of sharpening that we did right there. Fantastic. We can leave that there and continue on with our smoothing process if we want. So let's go back down here to our blurring. And we're going to make it median. There you go. It's thinking about it. Okay. Smart filters for you. Let's blur this corner. We can clean up our mask later. And we're going to make it stronger. 20 on median. There we go. We can clean up our mask later, like I said. And we're going to drag the mask I just made, because this is a specific task. I want to soften that corner. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, drag this mask into texture very high. Boom. See, that's starting to look a little on the fake side. I'm not sure if I love that. So I will fill that one with black. Oops, wrong one. Fill this one with black. There we go. And then I'll take this one, hold down Alt or Option, and drag it to medium high. Boom. Better. Off, on. You know what? It's almost indistinguishable. So let's drag it 1 down and turn off medium high. There you go. Look at that. We went from broad texture, but still good texture that we like. And then we smoothed out some areas here that, for me, just I like that a little bit better. Overall, looks pretty darn good. We smoothed out that corner. Yep. And that's a quick fix. And then again, stamp to new layer. delete the layer stack, and keep rolling. Very, very convenient, very, very powerful. Again, not supposed to be a full-blown skin workflow stack. You can probably use it for that, but dodging and burning and things like that and healing, they just can't be replaced really. But this is good for, I need to control some texture now, whether I want to sharpen or I want to smooth. Can you keep repeating that? Now we have some other options. NBP Texture Control Variable Blur. This one sets up the default texture extractions, but it gives you some variable blurring options rather than the 3 key blurring operators on one layer that you can toggle back and forth, or you can stack them. This one gives you all 3 of them separated, so you can use them individually. Some artists like to use Gaussian blur for one thing, median for another, and it just gives you more flexibility. You might end up just using one on a specific task, but you might want to have both. Okay, you can stack them to a degree, but it depends on layer order. Keep that in mind. For example, if I use median and blur, okay, and then if I use Gaussian blur, what I'm doing is I'm kind of replacing it because there's a copy of the image, right? So I'm not really blending them. This is now pure Gaussian on top. Yeah, I can use opacity. That'll sort of blend them. But if you want them to apply to one another, then you want the other one where they're all together on one smart filter, right? Very small variations, but still very, very useful, okay? So therefore, like that up here, I was using median. Maybe on our cheek here, I want to use Gaussian. And I have a whole bunch of little things I'm fixing texture-wise, and I want different options. Well, you have them. You have all 3 here. For most of these situations, Gaussian and median are going to be what you need. Surface is just there as a different option, okay? If anyone else ever has any feedback about something else to use, some people have professed to dust and scratches is a great way to do extractions for frequency separation. Fantastic. We can try to implement that if you guys feel it's useful. But I want to show you how this one works. It's a huge stack. It's our Pro series, but the stack is not about must use every layer. You might use 2 layers, but you get the flexibility to get the exact look that you want. Like I said, also, you don't have to do any smoothing or any type of texture replacement like that. You can literally come in here and choose, very high and sharpen the eyes a bit. And this is not just like a high pass. It kind of is, but it's an extraction, a frequency separation extraction, giving us a really solid, smooth way of sharpening. So I can sharpen that there if I want. I can take medium high, and I can even sharpen the hair if I really want, make it extra strong if for some reason I wanted to do that. Pretty common sharpening techniques, but we have everything available to us here. And then at any moment, if you decide, hey, I need to sharpen or smooth out this shoulder for some reason, blur that up, choose one of your textures, bring it back, something like this, add a little contrast, or maybe a lot of contrast. Let's go ahead and bump that up. There you go. And now we've softened the shoulder quite a bit, probably too much, but we softened the shoulder quite a bit if for some reason we wanted to do that. But then we have even more flexibility than that. So if we go to where we mess with our shoulder right here, this layer, while we're here, we have these blue buttons, and these are active. In other words, they're not going to have a stop to interrupt you or anything. You just push it. And these set up blend if. So let's say I go here to the highlights. I have 3 of them. The very brightest highlights, kind of medium highlights, and then highlight sweep, which is all the highlights fading away slowly to the darkest color. So if I go highlights, okay, as you can see what happened there, now I'm sharpening only the highlights, but it's not very obvious. So let's go to sweep. All right, so now that's mostly on the highlights and doesn't really show in the shadows. How about the other way? Shadows. How about shadow sweep? There we go. How about midtones wide? It avoids the highlights, so we can do that if we want. All kinds of choice. And we can reset the blend if we don't like it either, right? So that's the kind of situation where, I probably would use a thicker texture here. So I might take it up to medium. And then I would take that medium and maybe make it like a 30 or a 20, something like that. And paint in this area here just a bit. Maybe this area here, not that much, maybe just a little bit. Something like that. Smoothing that shoulder out. Again, probably a little too much, and that's okay, no big deal, because we can always change opacity. So, we can come down to our Gaussian blur, which is all over our shoulder, and change the opacity of that. There's like a 70%, really helps smooth the shoulder out a little bit, but keeps us a little bit grounded in reality, which is really good. So we can make those small changes, the sharpening bits that we wanted to do, and the smoothing of the shoulder. And we have all this flexibility to use different blurring operators and the different textures that we've extracted. Now, speaking of, we can also run Texture Control Variable Blur Manual. I'm going to run it again just to show you guys. This gives us 3 different layer stacks for our blurs, but It's also going to allow us to do the manual process. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the defaults. Just hit OK to every single one, just to kind of walk you through it. There's really no reason to spread this too wide. You don't need to go to like 1 through 100. It's not going to make a difference, like I said. But you can at least have some choices. All right, so we do this one, and then the final result is we have decided the textures up front because we have to, because it's using an apply image function. And then we have the different blurs available to us down here. These are, of course, smart filters as a reminder, so you can always change the settings to any of them actively, even while you've done your masking and everything else. So that's kind of the basics of how this works. At any given moment, if you're doing something a little bit more specific, like let's say I want to work with smoothing out these pants. Okay. Pretty common frequency separation technique. Let's see if we get success on that. I know I'm going to worry about the perimeter, so I'm probably going to run a subject mask on this, but let's go ahead and run a variable blur because I'm not sure which blur I'm going to use, or if I might stack them. Oh, excuse me for making noise. Or if I'm going to stack them or what. So let's see here. Okay. Now let's start with median. Figured that might be my best. I don't know. Oops, let's put that back to 100%. We're going to smooth out our pants to a degree. We can get the little edges and the little seams of the fabric to make them sharp again. We can mask that back, but let's smooth out the pants a bit. Just a bit here and there, wherever. Now we can increase the median if we need to. Let's try 25, just out of curiosity. Let's see what that does. Now, I can paint in, but I'm going to drag to match the mask, and then I can fix it. Hold on, Alt or Option. Drag this mask into high. Okay, that's not quite strong enough. Let's drag it into medium high. Okay, so off, on. The texture being preserved, off, on. Now, if you feel like, okay, the texture's okay, it's not bad. We can add contrast again. It's usually the first line of defense, like I said. Very good to do that. First line defense. And darken that up a bit. And you might think, well, I don't know, it looks fake. I don't know. Okay, you can do all kinds of things. You can leave the median alone, but then you can come here to Gaussian, maybe like a, I don't know, 20% flow. And you can take some of the tougher areas and blur them some more. Some of the areas that are a little thicker and causing a little bit more problems to the look you're after. Blur them just a little bit more if you need to. Very subtle effect. Okay. Now, on top of this, you can also continue to do other things as well. So, you can add contrast in a whole new layer if you want to, using levels. You can add color grading, of course. You can add some sharpening if you want, if you have a different way of sharpening. There's all kinds of things you can do. See that? So we're doing a bit of a smoothing of the pants. And although that looks a little bit blurry and a little bit strange, because it's a big job, there's a lot going on there. If you scale it back, the opacity, you just help the pants situation. They're not as strong, and you can try to work with the entire outfit manually as well. Don't forget, you can use the paint layer if you really, really want to. If you want to paint that in, sometimes blurring is what you want, and sometimes painting is what you want. So you come in here and just kind of casually paint the areas, keeping some of the shadows and whatnot, but you're trying to replace those folds, those creases. Something like, I'm doing a hatchet job of this, but you get the basic idea, okay? Something like that. And if we don't have enough broad texture and it feels a little funky, we can always come in again with like a 10% flow and just go to a thicker texture, one of the fatter textures up top, casually paint that in, and then change opacity as needed. Off, on. You can see the texture that we're keeping. Off, on. Tough job, like I said, but it gets the job done if you take the time to do it carefully. I set up stacks like this all the time, maybe not as many detailed layers, to do quick tasks like this all the time. And then I stamp to a new layer and I keep rolling, right? So very, very useful there for that sort of thing. Now, on a shot like this, which is again already done, but let's say I want to sharpen everything except the highlights. Okay, so let's run the normal one, straight up one. Give that a second. Like I said, running a lot of processes, processes, I should say. So it takes a little bit. And every now and then, Photoshop just kind of decides it's going to choke up and take 30, 40 seconds to do this. My computer, again, takes 15, 20 seconds usually. Okay, so here we go. So let's say I come in here, I'm going to sharpen. And I'll come in here and I'll quickly add a ton of sharpening, which is way out of control, but I'm doing it, right? Okay, and then I take my here and I go to shadows, only sharpening the shadows. Okay, opening, let's do shadow sweep. A little bit better. Sharpening the shadows without the highlights. A little too strong, I can take it down to very high. That's kind of cool, but we need to go to our shadow sweep again. There we are. See that? We're just barely sharpening the everything but the highlights, which I think works really well there. I can go to my high layer again and sharpen hair if I want to in a really smart way. And even on the hair, which is a lot of high contrast, high frequency, I can come in here and be like, oh, let's only sharpen the highlights or the highlight sweep. There we go. So it's not sharpening the dark areas underneath. Okay, just the highlights, which makes the highlights have a little bit of a stronger look. So they pop a little bit better. See that? A little bit of sharpening. It's great for targeted enhanced sharpening when you're done with your skin work and cleanup. It's great for sharpening an edit that's already been 100% done down to color work like this one. It's great for fixing specific textures. I could modify her sweater texture in some manner if I felt I needed to somewhere. It can definitely be used to do various things to tattoos depending on lots of details like, you know, the radius that you might need for the extraction and whatnot. But it's a way to control texture in all kinds of ways. And then we have, you know, the ways we can choose hard light, quickly, vivid light, linear light, and our blend if buttons as well. And I can, you know, choose quickly right now, no matter what layer I have to be working on, I can choose to make it all subject mask. And there we go. And that helps me keep my perimeters a little cleaner while I'm working. And I have a skin mask option as well. So that is the basics of NBP Texture Control Pro. As you can see, it is about controlling texture of all kinds. You know, like I said, I'm not trying to say that it's a perfect solution for a full skin workflow, though you can probably implement it in there. But it's great when you have a stubborn area that needs a specific fix and you're not totally sure of what it needs. So you're going to want some flexibility on your extractions and your blurring, and you want a lot of, you know, you want to have that dynamic control so you can choose different things and to dial in the exact texture that you want. Also great for some really, really targeted sharpening of different types, all in one stack. Done, you flatten or stamp to new layer and you keep rolling. So thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions, leave a comment below or email us, nbp@ninobatista.com. And that is a basic overview of Actions 16 Texture Control Pro.